Before we formally start the meeting, I will go to each attendee in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for virtual meetings. Where practicable, please also have your video switched on so that you can be seen by the other members in attendance and the public watching. Councillor Felicity Norman. Councillor Felicity Norman.
Yes, I can hear very well, thank you, Leader, and everybody.
Thank you, Felicity. Councillor Ellie Chowns.
Yes, hello.
Councillor Pauline Crockett.
Yes, I can hear you.
Councillor Gemma Davis.
Yes, I can hear you.
Councillor John Harrington.
Yes, I can hear you, thank you.
Councillor Liz Harvey, who may be joining us later. Councillor Ange Tyler.
Yes, I can hear you.
Councillor John Hardwick.
Yes, I can hear you, Chairman.
Councillor Peter Ginman.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Alan Selden.
Yes, I can hear you, Leader.
Councillor Jenny Bartlett.
Yes, I can hear you, Leader.
Councillor Terry James.
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Councillor Jonathan Lester.
Yes, I can hear you, thank you.
Councillor Bob Matthews. Councillor Trish Marsh.
Yes, can hear and see fine.
Councillor Carol Gandy as Scrutiny Chair.
Yes, I can hear and see you fine.
Thank you. And Councillor Elisa Swinglehurst, also Scrutiny Chair.
Yes, Leader, thank you. I can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they are called upon. Thank you. I will now formally open the meeting. We are now in the 10th week of lockdown. The circumstances we are now in are unprecedented, and they will be affecting everybody's lives. Our hearts go out to the families of those who have died, to those who have been seriously affected and are recovering, and to those who are still fighting against this virus. We here are among the fortunate ones. I urge everyone to continue to comply with government guidance, not travelling unless absolutely necessary, keeping to social distancing rules, and taking precautions to prevent infection from spreading. We owe this to the rest of our community, to the county, and the many health workers. So far as possible, we will try to run this meeting procedurally in the same way as if it had been run in the Shire Hall. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Council's website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making an official recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Councillors are encouraged to use the headsets provided where possible, and please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Please remember that others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. In line with normal committee practices, all microphones, apart from mine, have been placed on mute. When called on to speak, your microphone will be unmuted, and once you have finished, it will be muted again. When Cabinet colleagues wish to speak, please use the raise hand icon. I will then invite you to speak in turn. Please remember to lower your hand again after you have spoken. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group members in turn to provide the views and questions from their group on the matter under discussion. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. If any attendee loses connection, the meeting will be paused to ascertain if the connection can be restored. If it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable period, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of Cabinet members remains able to hear the proceedings and be heard. If you plan to leave before the end of the meeting, please can you indicate this in advance. Where Cabinet members are required to vote on an item, I will ask each Cabinet member in turn to indicate verbally if they are for, against, or abstaining. The results of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes of the meeting where there is a requirement to record the named vote. If a Cabinet member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Are there any questions about the procedures before we continue? So item 1 on the agenda, have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
I have apologies from Councillor Bob Matthews, leader. I've also received apologies from the Chief Executive and from the Director for Adults and Communities, and he has asked that Mr. Archibald deputise for him in the meeting.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? I hear none. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of April. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, so I will ask Cabinet members in turn to confirm that they agree the minutes. Councillor Ellie Chowns.
Agree.
Councillor Pauline Crockett.
Agree.
Councillor Gemma Davis.
Agree.
Councillor John Harrington.
Agree.
Councillor Felicity Norman.
Agree.
Thank you, Felicity. And Councillor Ange Tyler.
Agree.
Thank you. So those are unanimously accepted. Item 4 is to receive any questions from members of the public. Members of the public continue to have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We received 1 question for this meeting and the response has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted questions have been given the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to send an audio or video recording or to join the meeting to ask their question live. I will now ask the clerk to confirm whether any supplemental questions have been received. The questioner being Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you, leader. Yes, Mr. Wilkinson is not able to join us today, but he has submitted a written supplementary, which he's asked that I read to the meeting. So his supplementary question is as follows. It is good to see that you have the metrics up and running and that you have a review process, but nowhere do you mention targets. It is pointless having metrics without targets. Targets are there to drive the right behaviours. For example, there should be a target to reduce the number of management heads in the contract. I am not sure why you would commission for work to be done. Is this costing the ratepayer money? Have you approached other councils for their metrics? APQC have a metric classification template, which is pretty good.
So Councillor Davis, I don't know whether you're able to answer that multiple choice question or leave it to a written answer.
I'll do both if that's okay. So I'll provide a full written answer to him just because there's a number of aspects to the question. But apologies. Every metric has a target with it. So we have a performance rate of which they must achieve, and it's RAG rated. So whenever it doesn't reach that target, that forms part of the operations board where we're able to challenge that and work out the reasons behind why it's not working. If I can take back the one around commissioning work so that I can speak with Andrew Lovegrove around the finances, then I'll take that leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Moving on then to questions from councillors. We received 1 question for this meeting and a response has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. So that question is from Councillor Nigel Shaw. Councillor Shaw, do you have a supplemental question?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I do. The supplemental question is, I appreciate the statutory deadline for submitting the figures is the end of July. I was hoping that the Cabinet member might by now at least have an idea if the authority were going to come in over the 3-year land supply figure. What contingency plans does the Cabinet member have in place to bolster existing Herefordshire plan to stop a development free-for-all in the county if the housing land supply is reported as below 3 years in July?
Councillor Harrington, are you able to respond?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Shaw. As you say, the statutory return date is July, not your original date that you suggested they were to be returned by. We have been there has been a slight delay in getting out and viewing the sites as a result of COVID, so there's been some delays on that. In terms of what master plan response, we are working on some. I can give you an update, a written update, once we have an understanding of where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington and Councillor Shaw. Moving on then to the next item, which is the carbon management plan for 2021 to 2025 to 26. And the purpose of this item is to approve the Council's new carbon management plan, which sets out the Council's approach to delivering carbon neutrality by 2030-31 and sets an interim target of 75% reduction of the Council's own carbon emissions by 2025 to 26. For those who have access to the agenda pack, this is on page 15. Councillor Chowns, this is your paper.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, colleagues. Good to be with you all. And I'm really delighted to be presenting this, our new council plan, as the Leader explained, for the next 5 years, to put us on track to be zero carbon council by 2030, in line with our commitments under our declaration of climate emergency last year. And so this is the first of 2 5-year plans to achieve that target. It's the third in a series, so we've been working on this agenda since 2008-09, and I want to pay tribute to the work of colleagues, both officers and members of the administration and previous administration, for all that they did to push forward this agenda. We've made excellent progress so far, reduced our emissions on that 2008-09 baseline by 43% by 2018-19. I'm expecting it to be about 50% by the time the calculations are finished for last year, expecting to see our emissions drop further. And so this plan sets out our steps for the next 5 years, and it'll be supported by a much more detailed delivery plan, setting out exactly what the projects are that we'll be doing. But the plan includes a whole range of activities, such as, for example, supporting schools and academies, generating renewable energy and with behaviour change, working very closely with our partners and contractors, such as Halo and Balfour Beatties, purchasing 100% renewable energy for our buildings. I'm really pleased that we've made that shift already. Investing in further energy efficiency and renewable energy projects across all of our estate. A big continued focus on sustainable and active travel. And that ties in obviously very nicely with our better ways of working agenda, and indeed with the changes that have been forced on us by the COVID crisis. We've also got a 2020 climate challenge team bringing together staff from across the council to help identify new projects to help us meet those targets. So I'm personally very committed to this agenda and looking forward to driving it forward to the highest level of ambition that we can achieve. I want to just highlight a couple of things in the report. In the actual formal decision report, it does say on page 28 that no consultation comments were received. That's just about the very official consultation process. Actually, what we did with this, if you'll recall, colleagues, was we actually published the draft carbon management plan back at the beginning of March, inviting comments, not just from colleagues within the council, but also the wider public. And we did get a number of comments, and that led to some amendments. So I'm very pleased with that process. And one thing to highlight is that we have increased the scope of our calculation of our carbon footprint by including staff commuting. That was a step that hadn't previously been taken, but we're now including that so that we can take direct action addressing that as part of our climate commitments. So I warmly commend this plan to you all, and I really hope that this can kind of demonstrate the level of ambition within the council. It can help shape our own decision making on a day-to-day basis as we go forward over the next 5 and then 10 years. And I really hope that other organisations in Herefordshire will join us in taking a similarly kind of robust and ambitious approach so that we can meet that goal of becoming a zero carbon county. Thank you.
Right, well, does Mr. Boswell want to make any observations, or do we move straight on to questions from the Cabinet?
Thank you, Leader. I mean, Councillor Jones, that was a very comprehensive summary of the document, and as Councillor Jones says, this really builds on 10 years, well, 12 years of activity. It's a very clear plan that sets out the interim target of 75% by 2025. It's important to note that within the development of this plan, we've looked at a wide range of projects, and we've got really high level of confidence in getting to around the 65% target with what's already planned. We've also got a high number of projects where we think we can actually get somewhere closer to, I believe it's 84% of reduction. So we've set a target that we believe is challenging and realistic. And as part of our push and our strong aspiration to get to zero as quickly as possible, we're going to continue to develop that plan and keep it live over the next 10 years.
Okay, well, perhaps I'll set the ball rolling. We're in the midst of a bit of a crisis at the moment. Public views are perhaps changing as a result of this crisis. How do you see the crisis having an impact on this plan? Will it help it or hinder it? Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I mean, as I mentioned briefly just there, you know, one obvious way is that the COVID crisis has impacted on the way that the council itself works in terms of new ways of working, people working from home, reduction in staff commuting, promoting more walking and cycling. All of that is very much compatible and feeds into our agenda of reduction of carbon emissions. And so I think that probably some of those changes are going to become embedded over the long term. And so that's a way in which what's happened over the last few months will contribute towards us achieving our goals. But at the same time, I think there are a couple of broader issues, perhaps. I think there's the COVID crisis has created a sort of collective understanding of the need for renewal, really, in the way that we do things all together as a society. And so, you know, people are talking about this idea of building back better. And clearly, you know, that involves building back in a way that is compatible with our climate goals, also with our ecological protection goals, you know, the desire to really nurture wildlife in the county too. So that ties in very well and links with the themes of our county plan, you know, connectivity, well-being and sustainability. You know, this all ties together very well. So we need to do this stuff as part of the coronavirus recovery. And I think that what we've also realised over recent months is that, you know, we can collectively do really big things together for the common good, things that previously seemed a bit unthinkable, when we realise that a crisis requires it. And so I think, you know, there's a very broad societal understanding that the climate crisis also requires brave and urgent action. And, you know, there's an appreciation of the importance of leadership in sort of taking important decisions early on and putting its money where where its mouth is, and leading by example. And those are all ways in which I very much hope that we as a council are going to be operating to kind of take the lessons of this crisis and use that to impel us going forward and helping the county to become a better, fairer and greener place. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the Cabinet? Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it is an excellent plan. I really applaud it. It is a really good piece of work. And as we've heard, a lot of this has been going on for some time. I just wanted to comment particularly on the contribution of schools, which is very high, 40% plus, if we're counting in academies and if we include transport. So it is a really substantial part of where the challenges lie. And I'm obviously very, very keen that we address those. We talked about buildings, better quality, sustainable build, and I think we have already from the start made it clear that this is what we hope and expect to see. Energy efficiency measures, those sort of things, green travel plans, renewable energy. There's a whole raft of things we can do. And the learning from all this, it's really important that if, for example, as we do in the primary school in Leominster, we have solar panels on the roof, which were placed there by a small local cooperative. But one of the things we felt was very important was not just to have the panels there, but ensure that there was ongoing learning from them being there within the school itself. And that is a really important part of what we're talking about. Children are often way ahead of adults anyway. They're really enthusiastic about the environment, about climate, individual issues like recycling. They know a lot about all this stuff and are very positive and want to see these things happen. So I think there's a great deal we can do in that respect, reintroducing eco schools, forest schools, things of this kind. We need to make sure that they are there within our schools. And just to say, I was very pleased to see that you have in mind a school's energy resource pack with various activities that will help to reduce carbon and will be part of that learning and practice within the school itself. So lots of other things to comment on, but just wanted to draw attention specifically to that and say that we are right behind this effort in this particular area. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Jones. That's a very interesting carbon management plan report that you've put together. A good start to our plan, I see, is that we've bought 5 electric cars for council officer use. Do we have any further imminent plans in this area, such as working alongside transport to get electric buses or even PV panels on council-owned buildings?
Thank you, Councillor Crockett, for the question. So in terms of, actually your point about electric buses ties in really well with Councillor Norman's point about school transport. And of course, we really wouldn't want to be cutting the provision of school transport, because then that would cut our carbon footprint. That's completely against what we would want to be doing. We want to be getting kids on buses and get those buses running as ecologically as possible. So that level of detail is the level of detail that's going to be in the action plan. I'm sorry we're not able to publish it alongside the carbon management plan. I did hope we could do that, but I'm sure you'll understand that with the additional work of the coronavirus response, some things have been slightly delayed, but that will be coming out very, very soon. And I assure you, I'll be working very closely with colleagues on transport and, in terms of estates in terms of children's and families, to work out how we can push forward the carbon cutting agenda in all of our portfolios. Hope that answers.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jones. An excellent carbon management report and a way of going forward in reducing our carbon footprint over the next 10 years. There is just one matter of interest that one of my constituents brought up, because we've got the new LED lighting in now in our streets, and it does cast some shades and darkness. And I'm just wondering whether we can make sure that our streets don't become black spots for any criminality and sort of endanger our young people. I'm just wondering where we can look at that sort of area of lighting, that it's still maintained in some of the pockets that can cause vandalism.
Thanks, Councillor Tyler, for raising that issue. And if you could just let me know any specific locations that you're concerned about, I'll work with my officers to make sure that we look into them, because yes, public safety is crucial.
Right, well, I think I now move on to questions and comments from group leaders. I'll start with Councillor Lester, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by saying, Councillor Hitchener, I echo the comments you made at the beginning of the meeting about how we are really mindful of all of the challenges that have been ongoing, and we really as a group want to commend the ongoing work of all of the key workers in the county, because it's almost business as usual at the moment, but in this strange setup. But we're very mindful of the fact that officers, key workers and lots of volunteers continue to do that great work. Really pleased that we have our cabinet meeting, but obviously it shows that due to technical difficulties, if we don't get things sorted, we are still very, this setup is still very fragile and vulnerable. So I look forward to the improvements in the technology and the connectivity, because I would hate members not to be participating in these meetings, as happened to me yesterday and to others in planning. So there's still some work to be done in this medium. With regard to the carbon management plan, I'd like to thank Councillor Chowns for acknowledging the work that officers and the last administration had done on this project. You know, it was started quite a long time ago now, and a lot of things have been achieved. In particular, the LED streetlights. And in the plan, page 9 of the plan is a great photograph of the difference that has been made through introducing those LED lights. And it's a pity that that photograph wasn't available at the meeting in March last year. But also the plan does acknowledge all of the things that have already been done in terms of solar panel projects and active travel measures. And so a lot has been achieved so far. With regard to the group's view, and perhaps a question, if you like, that in the resources section of the report, it says that the plan will be delivered by established budgets and grant funding. However, the report doesn't really seem to stress the specific detail about the economic cost of the plan. So far, we've addressed as a council projects like the LED lights, where overall there will be a saving, and it's a spend to save initiative, which is a great thing as well as environmentally positive. But going forward, there's no doubt that there will be extra costs, and I think that it would be incumbent upon the council to ensure that those costs are highlighted in detail, so that we can see what we need to budget for in order to achieve these objectives. And lastly, the point I would make is that a good example would be, if it's the intention to plant more trees, more detail I think should be acquired about the cost of that, and where that would likely be in terms of offsetting. And lastly, we also appreciate that we're in the midst of a COVID crisis, which will have a knock-on effect to all kinds of council services. And I suppose, in essence, that highlights the need, I think, for a greater idea of the cost that this plan will have, so that we can budget accordingly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lester. I think costing is obviously an important issue. Councillor Chowns.
Thank you. Just briefly, 2 points. Councillor Lester, I'm delighted to acknowledge, again, the work done by officers and by your administration and those of previous people. And I think it's really important that we all acknowledge where we can build on each other's work and where we have common ground. And I really hope that we have a lot of common ground around this agenda. I would just like to push back slightly against the assumptions that cutting carbon is necessarily going to cost money. I think, as you pointed out, there have been a number of projects like the LED lighting where actually this has saved money. Purchasing electric cars rather than petrol cars saves us money because when we need to get new vehicles, because of course they're much, much cheaper to run, as well as being better for the climate and the environment. And there are many other examples. For example, if we can encourage people to walk and cycle more, then that's good for health as well as being good for the climate. So I think there are a lot of win-wins here. I take your point that you'd like to see the detail. We all would like to see that detail. And as I've explained, there will be an action plan coming forward soon that will have that level of detail. And I can assure you that I'm very committed to doing that. But fundamentally, this administration has been elected because people wanted us to prioritise people's well-being. They wanted us to prioritise care for our environment, our beautiful Herefordshire and the planet that we all share. And so I think it's really good to acknowledge the level of ambition that we have. And this plan, this carbon management plan, is one plank in that. We're really committed to doing everything that we can. And like I said earlier on, to putting our money where our mouth is, because we believe this is what will make life better for people in Herefordshire. Thanks.
Okay, so now Councillor Marsh as group leader for your group.
Thank you. Yes, it does feel very good news to see a 75% reduction in the target on the way to zero. 67% of councils have now declared climate emergencies, so we are in very strong company. And there was also good news that Britain's electricity system had its greenest ever month in May, without coal-fired electricity for a full calendar month for the first time since the Industrial Revolution. So I thought that was a good news story that shows, I think, very much the tide is turning in public opinion on realising the importance of investing in the things that are going to make sense for us over the next 20 years or whatever. I noticed that on page 17, it mentions the potential for there to be a flooding risk. Sadly, we all know that it's not just a potential, and I hope very much that, yes, looking at adaptation will also be part of our plan. I'm glad that staff travel has been added and that that's been able to be backcast so that we can see clearly how things are changing over time. And I'm very glad that the importance of contractors has been highlighted. I noticed that they are 17% and 2% of our footprint, which is much the largest after schools, but that actually we've only got 5% of our delivery plan costs are at the moment towards contractors. I'm hoping that's because we have, as we heard earlier from Councillor Davis, I'm hoping that's because we have very clear metrics and targets already in, but certainly working very actively with contractors will be important. I'm also hoping that academies, who are such a big part of our footprint, will be able to get funding like the MARE funding. I don't know if that is possible. And I look forward to working further with partners actively in the county-wide plan, which I know will be a follow-up and another step that's already well underway, as well as this plan for the council itself.
Thank you. I'll now go to Councillor James, and then if Councillors Hardwick and Selden wish to say anything on behalf of their groups. So first of all, Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. Just to say, I also endorse what Councillor Lester said about the work that's gone on by staff during the last 10 weeks, and especially how the Chief Executive has kept members and group leaders briefed on the situation throughout the county in that period. Going back to, my group welcome the report, perhaps lacking in detail, and I'd like to know soon we're going to get an action plan, when that will be happening, because it's in the detail that is important. I mean, the one thing that we need to do is increase massively the number of charge points we have, and rapid charge points. In my locality, we have one non-rapid charge point, and if tourism increases in the coming year, we'll need substantially more charge points everywhere throughout the county if we're going to achieve something. But also we need to realise that it's limited what the council can achieve on its own. It's private individuals and businesses that are going to achieve the bulk of the reduction in our carbon footprint, and we need to take them along with the public. And in the coming 12 months, we're going to see massive changes in society, and possibly massive unemployment because of the potential, well, almost inevitable recession that will take place in the next 12 months. So we're going to live in difficult times, and it's going to be very difficult to make major changes and take the public along with us.
Yes, I share your concerns for the economic situation going forward. Councillor Chowns, do you want to respond to those points?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor James, for your comments. Absolutely, we face a very serious situation, not only in the county, but the country as a whole, as a result of the coronavirus situation. And I think that's precisely why it's important for the county to step up and put its resources into investing into helping the county to build back better. Now, this report we're considering today is just about the council's carbon footprint, which is probably only about 1% of the county's carbon footprint as a whole. And so that's why I'm convening a steering group for a county-wide strategy to deal with the climate and ecological emergency. We met just yesterday. We have subgroups working on 6 work streams, a very clear plan for engaging with stakeholders across the county and across all of those sectors. And absolutely share your view that we need to engage as many people as possible in shaping our plan moving forward. And to my mind, that plan for tackling the climate and ecological emergency is going to be clearly integrated with our plan for recovery from the effects of coronavirus. For example, if we can stimulate the sustainable construction economy, then that's good in terms of job creation, as well as good in terms of creating infrastructure that helps us move to a greener economy. Just very specifically on your point about car charges and action plan, there is lots of action already still going on. It hasn't paused while we've been writing the carbon management plan. And I'd just like to invite Ben perhaps to give a brief update on that specific point about EV chargers.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and thank you, Councillor James, for that question. I'm really pleased to say that at the moment we've actually got 3 rapid charge points being installed at the moment. So that's one in Leominster, one in Ross, and one in Herefordshire, and that's to provide a strategic corridor down the A49. So that's something we've been working with Highways England on, and those will be the first of the rapid charges in the county. We also installed a new charge point at Elgar House only a month ago as well. So that's sort of immediate action that's taking place. In addition to that, and sort of acknowledging that actually as a council, it's for us to invest in infrastructure where we can, and also to facilitate the private market and to bring others to invest in charge points and infrastructure. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes, doing different options for how we can further develop and facilitate the marketplace on electric vehicles. So there'll be a further report coming forward later this year that outlines options for how we can accelerate and really increase the level of charging provision in the county.
Thank you very much. Move on then to Councillor Hardwick. Do you wish to make a comment?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd just like to reiterate the thanks to Ben Boswell and his team for the work that they have done on this plan, and the progress that they've made up to this point. With reference to the electric charged buses and school transport, it would be good to see progress on that. I think we can all see during this COVID pandemic how quiet the roads are, and school children that are actually attending schools, that there's a certain amount of transport provision for them. We've certainly noticed it locally to us with regards to bus being put in due to the road closure, but it would be good to see ongoing school transport support to lessen the number of vehicle movements with parents just taking and collecting children from school. But our group fully support the plan. Thank you.
And Councillor Selden.
Yes, thank you, Leader. First of all, congratulations to the team, and again to Councillor Chowns on producing an excellent report. It covers all the things for which the council is responsible for. What concerns us more than most things is actually the changes to the things that we don't have direct control over, which could affect us. Changes to building regulations, for instance, which require national legislation. And the fact that central government has been going around reducing subsidies to domestic electric vehicle charging points from £500 to £350 in the last year, and subsidies towards people who can install solar PV on their roofs. So I think we've done an excellent start. I think we've done the good easy bits. Now comes the difficult bit, is persuading everybody that it's a really good idea, and persuading central government that they've got to play their part by giving us control over the things that we don't have at the moment. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. So just to wrap up this item, any other comments from Cabinet members, or shall I move on to the recommendation? Okay, so I'll do that. So the recommendation is that the Carbon Management Plan 2020-21 to 2025-26, which sets out an interim target for the council to reduce its organisational carbon emissions by 75% based on 2008-2009 levels by 2025-26 is approved. So I go between screens, I think. So the roll call for voting, Councillor, well, I'm in favour. Councillor Chowns?
For.
Councillor Crockett?
For.
Davis?
For.
Harrington?
For.
Councillor Harvey, I just mentioned at this stage, I have been reminded she did send an apology to me this morning. So if that could be minuted in the minutes that she did send her apologies. Felicity Norman?
Yes, for.
And Councillor Tyler?
For.
Thank you very much. So that recommendation is accepted. I just want to check with the clerk. I haven't asked the scrutiny chairs to comment, of course, but I don't think this went to scrutiny.
No, I'm not aware that this particular report did, Leader, so at your discretion.
Thank you. So I'll move on then to item 7, housing related support for vulnerable young people. This is to seek approval to commission by means of a competitive tender process, a housing related support service for vulnerable young people, complemented by an offer of targeted and universal prevention services specifically developed for vulnerable young people aged 16 to 25. This item begins on page 43. Councillor Crockett, Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Wellbeing.
Thank you, Leader. As you've set out, this is housing related support for young people. This is a joint venture between adults and children's and families, actually. So the decision process to commission a new versatile accommodation and support service for the vulnerable young people from age 16 to 25. The service will provide accommodation support based for people with a variety of needs. It will also provide outreach support to a wider group of young people and a mediation service. The service will be based in accommodation at Bath Street, provided through an SLA with Connexus. The accommodation service will be funded by children and families on the invest to save and cost avoidance basis. The outreach, floating and mediation will be funded through resources currently directed to the Citizen Young People. This service will replace the Citizen Young People, which was formerly known as SHIP, although it is very different and a more diverse and flexible response to young people's needs. We have with us today Ewan Archibald, who has done a wonderful job with Krista Jackson on this paper. So we'll now ask for any questions, please.
Right, is Krista on the call as well?
No, I think. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. Right. Okay, Ewan or Krista, do you want to say anything by way of introduction?
The only thing I would add, Leader, before taking questions is just to say that this particular initiative is part of a wider piece of work that we're doing in conjunction with Children and Families Directorate to completely reshape the market and the provision of support and accommodation for care leavers and other vulnerable young people. So there's another service that's due to commence shortly for that this Cabinet has already approved. It will commence in the next month or so to support care leavers with very complex needs. And we also have plans which we'll be bringing forward during the course of the year for a new procurement framework for the purchase of accommodation and support for care leavers. So this is an important part of a wider approach.
Okay, so this very much has my support. I think this is a brilliant project to provide good quality accommodation for young people in the city. Will give them a real opportunity for their lives forever, really. And I was quite interested in paragraph 18. There's a reference there to involving young people. It sort of says care leaders and young people who have experienced a housing crisis will be invited to work with commissioners in the procurement process. And this will include at least 2 tender evaluation questions. Just to commend you for the fact that you are involving young people in the process. I think that's superb. I don't know whether you want to make an observation on that.
Yes, we're meeting with care leavers through Zoom, through their normal care leaver meetings. So yeah, we just feel that if we can get them to help with the questions and buy in, then it's going to be something that at least we'll be asking the providers the right questions.
Yes, Krista, you're quite passionate about all this conversation I had yesterday. Tell me what difference you think this is going to make to these young people.
I think it's going to give them the opportunity to have accommodation. The accommodation is good quality, good standard. They'll all have their own front door, be responsible for their own front door. And they will have support. There'll be a 24-hour support service. But also we're finding that there's a lot of young people that have low-level needs support. So the accommodation, the service will also include floating support service, outreach type support in the community. So we can reach those young people that are maybe ready for accommodation with support. So it's going to open up a whole new avenue of accommodation through social and private landlords that would previously not have taken those young people. If they understand they've got support, then they will. And the mediation is really about prevention, helping young people maybe on the edge of care or homelessness. And if we can get in there early with those young people, it's going to make such a difference. Because if you wait until those young people are older, then the cost to society is an awful lot more. So if we can help them and get them on the right pathway early on, then it's a win for everybody.
So how can what happens if they're not receptive? You know, all we've given to them, all we've helped them out with, and they go and trash the place. How, you know, it's a maybe politically incorrect sort of thing to suggest, but you know, how do you respond to that challenge?
Young people don't normally trash accommodation. It would be their own accommodation, but it's going to have 24-hour support. Those young people, when they move into that accommodation, they will know it's supported accommodation. They will know that it's their time to shine. It's their chance to learn all the skills that they may not have to transition into adulthood successfully and maintain their own accommodation. So those young people will have a pathway plan that they will work with jointly with the support provider, and they will set out their targets, and that provider will know, say a young person maybe hits a crisis time in their life, such as a death in the family, or they get bad exam results. They will be trigger points where there will be more checks, and they will maybe taper down or taper up that level of support to make sure that person gets the full picture approach. So I think, although working with chaotic young people, I can't guarantee that a young person isn't going to damage the property. I think we can mitigate the risks as much as possible with a really good support provision and buy-in from the young people at an early stage.
That's great. Thank
you. If I could just add to that, Leader, some context. As Krista says, it is unusual for young people to damage their property in that way, but of course it does happen for particularly vulnerable individuals with chaotic lives or more complex needs. And I'd also make the point that that issue in accommodating people is not exclusive to young people. We've got working age and older adults who also sometimes do that, related to, again, chaotic lifestyles or complex needs that they have. And part of the planning around managing that, and we don't expect it to be a common problem, but there is usually planning using some of the housing benefit money that may be attracted to schemes, is to set up a sinking fund to build up provision to be able to meet those additional costs of repair and replacement if those are occasioned by a particular user group. So it's likely that that will be brought into play potentially for this scheme, but we don't expect a high level of that sort of issue.
Okay, so Councillor Norman, then Councillor Tyler, Councillor Davis, and actually Mr. Baird was going to. I don't know whether you want to say anything. No, we'll go to Councillor Norman first.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, and thank you, Krista, for really eloquently enlarging on the benefits of this. I think it's a wonderful scheme. Very, very happy to support it. I think the key here is what we're working towards is successful independent living. We're encouraging and working with young people to give them all the support they need to become independent at a sensible pace, if you like, with that input and support that they might need. The two obvious benefits are that we will have our younger people closer to home within the county rather than, as they quite often are, outside the county. And of course, as a result of that, it'll help to reduce the really quite extraordinary costs that are involved very often. So that's those are both very positive things about this. Others have mentioned the involvement of young people in this, which I think is also excellent, consultation with them and getting their views. And that seems to me to be really important. And as the fact that it is their own, I think, is going to be such an important part of how they behave and react and respond, and that's really what we want to see. And just a reminder, as I think we're all aware, this is very much in line with what we want to be doing for our young people. Our commitments within the Children and Young People's Plan, Care Leavers Covenant, Corporate Parenting Strategy, homeless prevention. You know, you go on, and this ticks all those boxes. It's really a positive step towards enhancing and enabling young people in the best possible way. So I'm very keen to support this.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And just like to reiterate, really, it's a really important report that Krista has brought forward to us today. It will enable our young people to have a voice, because there are some of them that come from a broken background, and for them to understand that they will have this opportunity and to have a place of their own. I think they will act appropriately and, you know, have and move forward in a life that with the support. And there's a lot of young people that don't have that, and I just think this is really good for the council to be supporting our young people at this, especially in this sort of time as well. So I do commend this report, and I think it's an excellent opportunity for our young people. So thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Okay, yeah, just echoing really what originally people have been saying about how fantastic an opportunity this is. For me, this project is about seeking to address inequalities amongst our young people. So people who don't have the same opportunities in life, they don't want handouts from the council. They don't want people to just keep giving them stuff. They want the opportunity to be able to be given a decent chance at life. And that's what I see this as. This is an opportunity for somebody to have their own front door, to take ownership of their life and learn those really invaluable independent living skills. So I absolutely couldn't agree with this report more, and I'm really excited about what it provides for young people within Herefordshire. I've got a couple of queries just regarding the equality impact assessment. So I've had a look at the assessment. I'm equalities lead at the hospital, hence why I love these equality impact assessments. But one of the things that I think is missing is we talk about disabilities and how we're going to be able to address them. But I wondered if we could put in there as well about young people who might have physical disabilities, because we talk about the mental disabilities, and I was looking at some of the setup for what it's going to look like, and actually there's a large number of stairs. We do have people not just with physical disabilities as well, but you might have people who've got autism or ADHD, and how do we protect their rights under this equality impact assessment? How can we mitigate against the risks for them? So I would like to see something included around that. And one of the things that this is a question really, I'm really keen for us to be we promote health and well-being. I'm really keen on establishing financial health and well-being, because that's really important, especially for people that have got mental health issues, that they do tend to fall into that problem where they have money with finance. And I wonder what kind of system we're going to have in place to capture that, and what kind of service Connexus are going to provide.
Connexus are providing the housing management side of it. The support provision will look at ensuring that they are independent, can be independently financially viable. So we will be looking at employment, training, opportunities, so encouraging and explaining to the young people that that is the route to go in order for them to be able to afford to live independently. And that will be a lot of work that the support provider will be expected to do. They will also, if there's somebody who has a disability or maybe has a different way of learning, then we can look at different options. And I have said about looking at innovating ideas for learning and maybe a bit more creative ideas, so it doesn't have to just be exams. A lot of the learning can be done outside of that formal classroom environment. So I think everything that's embedded is going to be about education, training, and that link with financial stability. And with regard to the young people with disabilities, yes, it is disappointing that the accommodation isn't geared up for somebody, say, in a wheelchair, which I was really hoping it could have been, but unfortunately it isn't. But what we've done is, by encompassing the floating support, we could work with our strategic housing team to look at building provision and then bringing in that support. So that's maybe something that would have been an option for that young person before, because we didn't have that support service. But now they could live independently with some support in an accommodation that was maybe adapted for their needs.
I think that's exactly it, is that can we have that in the equality impact assessment, so that that's identified that anybody with physical disabilities isn't being disadvantaged by the fact that that building isn't ready or appropriate for them. I'd be really grateful if that could be included.
Yeah, yes, I will. Yes,
thank you.
Okay. Well, I think I'll move on then to the group leaders. And actually, but using my kind of discretion, if I may, I think that although it might not have gone to scrutiny, I think if the scrutiny chairs wanted to comment, because there's so much part of their area of interest, so I'll add them on the end, if I may. We'll go the same route, if I may. Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also for allowing the scrutiny chairs to have a say, because I know that Councillor Gandhi had a specific question about the type of accommodation. So I won't ask that question. I'll let Councillor Gandhi just query that. But just to say on behalf of the Conservative group, we really welcome the commissioning of this service. Providing this type of support for our vulnerable young people is probably one of the most important things that we do to make sure that they get that experience of living on their own, but in a way that's fully supported by a service like this. So this is a really, really crucial service to set up, and we absolutely welcome it and think this is definitely the right way to go forward. Thank you.
So Councillor James? Not on my screen. I hope you're still there, Councillor James.
Yep. I'm unmuted. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I managed to unmute myself. Yeah. Can I say I welcome this particular development, and it's an indication of how things have changed over the last 25 years. 25 years ago, there was very little support, if any, for those that once left our system of vulnerable children and children in care, and they were sort of thrown into the deep, as it were, having left our support from local authorities. So I welcome this wholeheartedly, and I know my group is very much in support of this and have advocated this sort of development for many, many years.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Yes, also very much welcome the all-round approach with the, like the description of the ways that confidence, participation and independence will be encouraged as well, so that it's a really rounded approach. I'm glad it's more local and more flexible, and that we will be able to do a great deal more prevention, and so that there is parallel provision for people with more complex needs who perhaps the 2-year time frame might not suit. If it was possible to hear a little bit about people who have natural ties to market towns and how they might benefit from this approach, I would be grateful to hear that.
Yeah, the accommodation is in Hereford. I've done a lot of consultation with young people, and the majority of young people wish to reside in Hereford, especially when they're accessing education or training, because the majority of the opportunities are in Hereford. If they have to travel from Leominster or even Ross, it's costs money. So before they start, they're already at a financial disadvantage to the young people that are residing in the city, in Hereford City. So that was one of the reasons why I thought this was a good opportunity. With the floating support service, it does open it up, as I said before, so young people, if they want to remain back in, so the supported accommodation is for up to 2 years, and I do envisage that some of the young people will be supported and maybe move on within 3 months or 6 months. So it's moving out of their market time for that period of time, but then they would have that opportunity, once they've gained those skills, to live independently, to move back out to the market towns if that's what they want to do. But they will also have that support to be able to do that. So I'm hoping that will work.
Thank you. So Councillor Hardwick.
I don't think there's a great deal that I need to add, but our group is very supportive of this, and I'd like to congratulate Krista, Ewan and the team for the work that they've done in bringing it to this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Selden, do you wish to?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to comment, say that it's really good to see this provision evolving from shipping to this and over time, and perhaps when this stage has evolved into something else, and we can address perhaps some of the market towns issues that have already been mentioned. But without the financial support of people travelling, I don't think that will be perhaps possible in the timescales we're talking about.
Councillor Gandy.
Thank you. I welcome the report. You're right. This particular accommodation issue has not gone to scrutiny, although we have looked at the one for more complex needs. And my understanding of this one is that that it will be sort of self-contained units with all facilities available to them, and that, you know, where necessary, couples could live in this accommodation, as could someone with a child, and I think that's very important. I think I think we have moved a long way from where we were, and although I personally represent a rural area, and I harp on about the fact that rural areas don't get very much for facilities, but I do recognise that in situations like this, it is really important that young people with supported needs are in close to the city, because I think, you know, that's where most of the services are, that's where the good transport links are, and that's very important to them. I perhaps would like at some stage, as we have been trying with you, and with regard the supported housing for the more complex needs, to have for our scrutiny team to have an opportunity to perhaps look at this accommodation. But I realise at the moment that's not possible. But I think in principle, you know, we are really supportive of this, and I think the more we can do with this, with accommodation like this, the better it can be, because, you know, as someone said, you know, 20 isn't even 20 years ago, less than that, young people leaving care were almost just basically said, that's it, off you go. And it's really, it's hard if you've not been in care, but if you have had the support of your parents, even when you've continued, as I know through supporting my own children after they've left home. But for our young care leavers, it is a really difficult way to go forward, and I really do support this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Leader, if I can just answer part of the point made by Councillor Gandy.
Yeah.
Obviously there are restrictions on visiting premises during the current situation, Councillor, but commissioners and others have been able to make site visits to the other site you mentioned, albeit in small numbers. So I'll get colleagues to liaise with you and committee members. It wouldn't be possible for the whole committee to visit at once, but we should be able to arrange some visits over time, and we'll liaise with property and other colleagues on that. In principle, that ought to be possible at this site as well, but we'll liaise with housing and property, housing colleagues on that one, property colleagues on the other one, and see what we can arrange. As long as you're willing to go around in groups of 2 or 3 people, potentially, then I believe that could be arranged.
I think that would be very helpful. What I would not support going forward would be any form of accommodation for care leavers where there was shared facilities, such as shared bathrooms, shared kitchens, that sort of thing. I don't think we are now in this 21st century in the business of offering that sort of accommodation to our care leavers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yes. Councillor Slinglehurst.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I absolutely welcome this. Congratulate the officers on their work here. And obviously, as Mr. Archibald says, it's part of a wider approach, and I think that's very positive. This is a really positive step, and we're going absolutely in the right direction. I was really touched by the phrase that Ms. Jackson used about it being their time to shine. Because when I think about these things, and as my role as a corporate parent, it's the simple truth of the matter is that if this is what you would want for your own child, then this is what you would want for care leavers, and that's the standard that we need to aim for, and the goal that we always should have in mind. And I think this is a really positive step towards achieving that, and to bringing the kind of the appropriate level of support that is flexible, that's got the right touch, as it were, in consultation with those young people, so that they feel supported. They don't feel that we're kind of bossing them and being in their life, so that they have the strength to own their lives, to go forward and have that independence that we all take for granted. So it's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so back to the Cabinet. Anybody want to add anything? I see no one. Just a couple of points from me to finish. The cost savings of doing this are substantial. £250,000. We haven't mentioned that. Yes, we want to change lives, but actually to do this with that saving is just fantastic, and it's without any capital expenditure on our part as well, which I think just adds to it. So I do hope this project works really well. I don't know whether we have a system for reviewing these sorts of proposals and how they get on, but I'd have thought that in probably 18 months or 2 years' time, it would be very good to go back to this paper and see whether the savings that have been suggested have been made, and also to look at the effect on people's lives. I don't know if anybody can say to Councillor Gandy, you have your finger raised. I'm not sure you're allowed to speak, actually, but I'll let you.
You're so kind, Leader. I was just going to say that we probably, through scrutiny, would want to review this after a period of time. So you might not think we perhaps should be reviewing the cost savings, but certainly we would be wanting to review the impact, the positive impact, hopefully, on both this scheme and the earlier scheme, to see that it is actually achieving what we want it to achieve.
Good. Mr. Baird, you had your hand up for a long time.
It's a long hand, thank you, Linda. Yes, it's just fantastic to hear all the supportive comments from everyone that recognises the really good work that has taken place, and to reiterate that the colleagues have really gone from a blank sheet and working with young people to think about how flexibly Herefordshire can meet their needs more locally. So I think the points made about supporting and enabling independence, but in a local situation, really will move this county forward in terms of the care it has for vulnerable children and young adults. And as Councillor Gandy mentioned, and you and Krista, it is part of an overall approach that we've been taking, and I think looking at it with the other initiative that's taking place, in the round in about 18 months would be a great opportunity to see the different aspects, taking shape and having that positive effect we all envisage for these people who will use them.
Excellent. I'm just looking through. There's one section which we want added, so I'm going to propose the recommendation as written here, but perhaps the clerk or somebody else could note the change which was around adjustments for people with autism, ADHD and that kind of thing. At the moment I can't see my screen. Is that something perhaps one of the officers will pick up in the wording?
Yeah, so I believe the suggestion from Councillor Davis was that we amend and update the equality impact assessment, which is an appendix to the report. We're very happy to do that, and of course those plans are intended to be sort of organic, evolving documents anyway, and not be put on a shelf, so we can do that. It may not need amendments to the report itself, but if you want to make, we could add a reference in the equality section to that issue if you preferred, and that would require an amendment to the report.
I think that would be good to have a record in the report itself, please. So the recommendation is that the commissioning by way of an open procurement process of an accommodation support service, along with floating support and mediation services for vulnerable young people aged 16 to 25 years, be approved, and B, that authority be delegated to the Director of Adults and Communities following consultation with the Director for Children and Families and Cabinet members, to award a contract for housing related support services for a period of up to 5 years, a maximum cost of 3.1 million, subject to that one amendment. Do the roll call. Councillor Chan.
Sorry, Leader.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, Leader.
Yes.
Are you making a change? Is there a proposed change to the recommendations? Or are you simply asking officers to make an operational decision to change the equality impact statement, just to be very clear?
Gemma, what's your preference on that?
Yeah, just the operational decision to change the EIA, like Ewan said, it's organic, so it can change as it goes along anyway.
Thank you. So there's no proposed amendment to the recommendations. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. So the roll call for voting. So I start with Councillor Chowns.
4.
Councillor Crockett.
Definitely 4.
Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Harrington.
4.
Councillor Norman.
Yes, 4.
Councillor Tyler.
4.
And I'm also 4. So that is recommendation is accepted. Thank you very much. I'll now move on to item 8, future refugee resettlement. This is to endorse the approach to a long-term flexible commitment to the ambition of settling at least 125 refugees in Herefordshire over a period of 5 years. This item begins on page 81 of the agenda pack. Councillor Crockett, I think this is from your portfolio. If you'd like to introduce this subject, thank you.
Sorry, Leader.
That's fine.
To unmute. Yeah, thank you again. So this is a proposal for an extension of the county's resettlement of refugees. It will build on the successful welcoming of more than 90 refugees in family groups since 2016. It's proposed to take further refugees over the next 5 years to 2025, resettling at least 125 people. The council is not committing to take particular numbers at any particular time during that 5 years. The main challenge to timing and managing resettlement is sourcing family-sized accommodation. This is still most likely that this will be found in Hereford City. The decision will allow flexibility as to how to support an orientation for refugees is best provided, whether through commissioning a service or employing a worker directly. Generally speaking, all the costs of the council in resettling refugees over the 5 years are met by the Home Office, and therefore there is no financial risk for this decision. The decision does not relate to general asylum provision or unaccompanied young people. I'd like to thank Amy Wiles and Ewan Archibald again for this very detailed report. And I know Ewan's here, but I can't see Amy. So questions will go through Ewan, I suspect.
Yes, Amy Wiles on the list of participants, so she's probably on another screen somewhere.
Oh, yes, there she is now. I see her.
So, Mr. Archibald, do you want to say anything further?
Nothing in particular to add, no, Leader. A good overview by Councillor Crockett, and we'll happily take questions.
Okay. Well, I'll start just asking how are these refugees chosen? How do we have control over that, or is it the Home Office that tells us who we're to take, or how does it work?
So if I take the answer, the UNHCR allocate cases to the UK, and then cases get allocated to each region. So we sit underneath the West Midlands Strategic Migration Partnership. The way that we're proposing to approach this or any future cohorts of refugee resettlement would be in the same way as we have done previously, is where we identify suitable housing in the first case. We then put forward what that housing is in terms of numbers of bedrooms, accessibility, etc., school places that are available for particular year groups or any particular limitations, forward to our local migration partnership. They will then send profiles to us as a local authority, and we get a chance to review those profiles and check that we feel we're able to meet the needs of those individuals within the housing and health provisions, etc., locally. And then we go back and formally accept those profiles. And obviously, and we have in the past, if we don't think we can meet the needs of a particular family, we've gone back and said, no, sorry, please send us another case. And that's the process.
Interesting. Okay, any other Cabinet members with questions or observations? Councillor Chowns.
Just want to welcome this report. Thank you very much. And I'm really, really pleased that in response to kind of consultation, the language has been changed to state that we'll welcome at least 125 over the 5 years. I think it's really important to send this signal that we want to extend a welcome to as many as possible, taking into account, obviously, our capacity to welcome people, as Amy has explained, but as many refugees as possible, on the basis not just of sort of compassion for the traumas that they've been through, which is unimaginable for most of us, but also, you know, the richness and diversity that they bring to our county. So I'm really positive about this extension of the scheme, and thank all colleagues who've been involved. Thanks.
Councillor Davis.
Yes, firstly, I really welcome the report and the wording which we've used in that the officers have used within it, which really make it clear that we are talking about refugees, people that have gone through things that none of us could imagine, and making sure that it's worded in that way. So I think that's important, and completely welcoming what Councillor Shines just said about the richness that can be brought from people of different ethnicities, ages, sex. It would be great for us moving forward. One of the questions that I've got is, we were talking earlier about housing and the limited housing available, and that it was likely to be in Hereford. What I'm trying to understand is, at the current refugees within Herefordshire, where are they predominantly based? Because we are Herefordshire, and it would be great if we could have a spread across Herefordshire. And in line with that question, have we spoken to people who are already here as refugees to understand where is the best place for them to be? What kind of communities would they thrive in? Would they want to be a part of? Do they want to be near to people who speak the same language as them? I know this from working at the hospital, that we have some great Filipino groups that would like to stay in one community because they're able to go over for meals and their children to talk. So I just want to know how much engagement have we had with current refugees to determine those factors.
There is continuing engagement with the refugee cohort. Some are more interested in sharing their experiences and feeding back to the council than others are. And Amy will be able to provide possibly more comment on any detail that's come out of that. The overall consideration is about finding appropriate accommodation for refugees in a given area. So from the beginning, we haven't assumed that all accommodation will be in Hereford, and there's been particular review of the options in Leominster over a number of years, and at one time we thought it was inevitable we would have to source and place some refugees in Leominster. The challenge is, what we don't want to do obviously is put just 1 or 2 or 3 families and find them isolated in one part of the county, because that would be challenging for them individually as families and challenging from a community cohesion point of view. So we, both in the past and looking forward, if we were to consider finding accommodation and placing refugees in Leominster, for example, or one of the other towns, we'd need to be convinced that there was sufficient accommodation in the right parts of, sufficiently close together in that area to make that safe and viable. That has so far not been the case, and although we've continued to review it, the opportunities are likely to be better in Hereford to find places for refugees. And generally, they will provide opportunities for refugees of each kind of wave of arrivals to link with each other, and also link with the wider and slightly more diverse Muslim and wider minority ethnic populations that are mostly in Hereford City. But Amy may be able to add something on the engagement aspect.
So if I just pick up on that, then building on what Ewan said, I mean, Hereford has been identified as having the greatest number of opportunities for this community. For example, those who are of a Muslim faith, you've got the Friday prayers at the Kindle Centre, being able to access any specific food types, able to access public transport to be able to get to larger cities is certainly part of the initial considerations. We've also found any families who've moved within Herefordshire have actually predominantly stayed in Hereford or very close to Hereford City itself to date.
Thank you, Amy. Councillor.
Thank you. Just to let you know, Councillor Hitcher, this key worker has to go to another meeting, so right. I should be leaving now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. So Councillor Norman and then Councillor Tyler.
Thank you. Just really wanted to, it's a very good report. Thank you very much for that and for the enlarging of some aspects through this discussion. Just really wanted to repeat what has come up before, and one thing I feel very strongly about, which is the importance of language, of, you know, all the support we can give to our refugee families coming in. Language is absolutely the key to their integrating, to their getting work, training, learning opportunities and becoming part of the community. So everything we can do to support that, I think is really, really essential. Thank you.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I welcome this report. It's noted that there's been 95 refugees settled into Herefordshire since 2016. It's just a question, really. How many of these refugees have settled in quite, nicely, or have they caused sort of some particular problems? And how have we addressed that through their time in Herefordshire? Because, if we can keep these refugees together and support them through their process and how they relocate to Herefordshire, if they can't sit in Herefordshire, is there an exit strategy for them to go to a different part of the country?
So if I answer that, when the refugees are resettled here, they are given what's called refugee status with a 5-year limited leave to remain. So they can reside in the UK for 5 years as refugees. They're obviously here on this scheme as part of a resettlement programme, which is funded by the Home Office. Whilst they remain in Herefordshire, Herefordshire remains receiving that funding. If any families did want to move to a different part of the UK, they're absolutely free to do that. They can move around as they wish to do so. If they wanted to move and continue to receive the support as resettled refugees, that would be a discussion that we as Herefordshire would have to have with whichever local authority area that they were moving to. And if there were particularly exceptional circumstances as to why they felt a need to move, for example, if there were community cohesion concerns or any safeguarding risks, then that would be the sort of thing where the Home Office would then look at moving that funding to a different local authority area. So absolutely, they can stay in Herefordshire, welcome to stay in Herefordshire, but are not prevented from moving on. I'm just trying to remember, there was another part to your question, Councillor Tyler.
Well, I think it was about how generally well people have settled in, and if I can pick that up. So generally very well. There have been no substantial issues across the board with any of with the community and the families overall. As you'd expect with any random sample of people, you will get some issues that need to be addressed. We've got disabled people with needs that need to be met. We've got children in school. You may have issues of domestic violence or other things that are part of normal life, but there have been no issues in particular with this resettlement over a number of years, which is a measure of success, I think.
Thank you. Comments from group leaders. Again, Councillor Lester, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. The Conservative group, we're very proud of the fact that between 2016 and 2019, the council was very successful in taking ownership of the obligation to accept refugees into Herefordshire and accommodate them accordingly. It's not only a testament to the staff for being so successful in conducting the integration scheme, but it's a reflection also of how welcoming people in Herefordshire have been to those who, through no fault of their own, have had to abandon everything that they know, suffer hardships that we can only imagine, and have to start a new life all over again. So well done to Herefordshire. And I think that if I remember rightly, there was a national newspaper article about how successful Herefordshire had been in adopting this scheme. So given that the council has been so successful in the past, we as the Conservative group support the initiative fully, to have that flexible commitment over the next 5 years. And once again, it's just evidence that Herefordshire is prepared to rise to the challenge, and so we welcome this proposal.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. I just endorse what Councillor Lester has just said. I just also say that we're very lucky that we live in this country when we see what's going on in the rest of the world, and especially in America at the present, both now and what has happened over the last few years. We're very lucky that we live in such a civilized and compassionate society.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Yes, thank you. I too am very glad that the green at least was accepted. And there was a lovely story, I don't know if everyone caught it, on the 7th of May, where the Syrian refugees in the county had banded together and raised £500 for the hospital. So I thought that was a testament to how much they feel part of it and wanted to give back. I welcome the fact that there's Friday prayers, and it's good to have the major faith group, the Muslims, that 24% of the world are Muslims, and the Arabic is 5th in the world. And I think it can only add to Herefordshire to be able to enjoy that sort of diversity. So I'm very pleased that this is going through.
Councillor Selden, and then Councillor Hardwick.
I think everything on the subject's been said, Leader, so I won't comment further. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot to say that in the equalities impact assessment, if it was possible at D to add in schools and educational and language providers, that would be excellent. But I'm quite sure that needn't change the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, nothing more to add from our group either. I think it's a wonderful initiative to integrate these people into our society, and as already been said, Herefordshire is a wonderful place to live, and we're fortunate enough to be able to share that opportunity for these families.
I don't know whether the scrutiny chairs wish to say anything or whether we can move on. Councillor Swingle, I know you'll both be very supportive of this, and your group leader's already spoken. So, all right, well, I'll move on to So I put the following recommendation to the Cabinet, that the long-term flexible commitment to the ambition of resettling at least 125 refugees over 5 years is approved, and authority to determine numbers of refugees settled in any 1 year and any associated logistics is delegated to the Director for Adults and Communities in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing. So the roll call for voting: Councillor Chowns.
For. for Yuwafiq Kuala, I think it is in Arabic.
Oh, right. Councillor Crockett.
Just 4.
Councillor Davis has left the meeting. Councillor Harrington.
4.
Councillor Norman.
4.
Councillor Tyler.
4.
So that recommendation is accepted. I think, is the clerk happy for me to close the meeting now? Have I missed anything?
No, I think that's everything we had on the agenda, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for attending. These are difficult times, but it's good to have a couple of very positive items on the agenda. And I wish you all good health. And yes, until we meet again. If any people would like to, we would like to receive feedback on the way this meeting is taking place. And if you, member of the public, whoever, do please email governance-support-team@herefordshire.gov.uk. The next meeting is planned for Thursday, the 25th of June at 2:30. Thank you very much.